During that year, I realized that I have a humongous gaping hole, which is traditionally referred to a God-sized hole, and that I needed something to fill it in. And so I started sleeping, which just sleeping by 8 hours a day, I lost 20 pounds. Then eating a lot more greens. Then I went to a detox retreat, and I started doing a lot more exploration in meditation and yoga.
Welcome to Startup Health Now, the podcast where we celebrate the entrepreneurs and innovators reimagining the future of health. I'm Logan Plaster. Quick note for accredited investors before we launch the episode. Last quarter, we launched the Startup Health Moonshots Impact Fund. It's a unique rolling fund that makes it easy to gain exposure to a diversified global portfolio of private health innovation companies. Information on the fund and how to start investing is at healthmoonshots.com. Now, on to the show. This episode is a conversation with Victor Penev, the CEO and founder of Edamame, which joined Startup Health in 2013. Penev is a leader in the food as medicine movement, this idea that what we eat has an awfully big impact on our health and a range of chronic diseases. So with Edamame, Penev built up one of the world's most comprehensive food databases. It's a food data API that companies like Amazon, Microsoft, and the Food Network, to name just three, use to deliver more personalized and accurate information to customers. But this interview isn't just about food as medicine. We invited Victor onto this fireside chat because of how he thinks. Like so many founders, Penev went through a phase with his first startup where he worked all day and he stressed all night. He didn't sleep enough, he gained weight, he was unhealthy and unhappy. That led to a crisis moment that opened the door to an entirely new way of thinking and eventually radically changed how he managed his company. In this conversation, we learn how Victor embraced healthy habits, both in body and mind, and for his team, while also remaining ambitious and driven in his startup. This conversation was hosted by my colleague Ann Dordai and was attended by founders from the Startup Health community. Hope you enjoy.
To kick things off, I'll have Victor, you kind of give us a little bit of background on your personal journey as a mindful entrepreneur. I think it's really important to start from the very beginning, because I know that you began as an entrepreneur with dealing with a lot of stress and a lot of managing those emotions and managing that balance between being an entrepreneur and being a mindful entrepreneur. So I'd love to hear your personal journey to start.
Right. Well, thank you, Anne. So first of all, I didn't start as a mindful entrepreneur. That kind of, got built over time. But the story that you're referring to was that that would be probably 11, 12 years ago. I was back in Bulgaria, where I'm now, right now, and I was leading my last startup, which, we built the largest internet company in Bulgaria, very successful, but it came with tremendous amount of stress. I came into the company when it was 50 people. I grew to 130, market leader, constant negotiations, constant hiring, firing, growing the company. And at the same time, I was a single father. I had just divorced and I had taken over the care of my son. So layer that on top, and I had a life that was a wreck from a health perspective. I was probably sleeping 5-6 hours, and that probably sounds familiar to a lot of folks. Constantly running 120 miles an hour, constantly having been put in different directions to make decisions, and as a result, I put a lot of weight. I was constantly stressed, started losing hair. All the usual signs, physical signs of a distressed mind body. And luckily, we sold the company. So after that, I had a year of transition, but I took a year off. I came back to the States, and during that year, I realized that I have a humongous gaping hole, which is traditionally referred to a God-sized hole, and that I needed something to fill it in. And so I started sleeping, which just sleeping by 8 hours a day, I lost 20 pounds. Then eating a lot more greens. Then I went to a detox retreat, and I started doing a lot more exploration in meditation and yoga. I had been practicing yoga for about 10 years, but it was purely that physical vinyasa slash hatha Western style yoga. And I started dabbling a lot more into the pranayama and meditation aspects of yoga. And little by little, that kind of seeped into my professional life. And I found a place where things are very balanced and I'm happy no matter what. And it took time. Obviously, it took time, but here we are. And so I'm happy to share that journey. But the story was I was on a course to shorten my life significantly and be very sick. And luckily, I was able to kind of get hold of that and turn it around.
Nice. So I think that you sort of touched on getting into much more mindful practice and becoming a more balanced entrepreneur. But I think that it's definitely probably a question that's on a lot of entrepreneurs' mind, which is how do you actually balance that staying calm and relaxed, but also having that mindset necessary to be an entrepreneur, which is usually quite grueling and very very demanding. So just curious how you found that balance and how you sort of
Yeah.
maintain that now.
It is a mindset, and I know Steve and Unity have kind of hammered into our heads, the whole mindset approach. But it is a mindset. There is nothing that is that urgent. If I've come to a few realizations over my time, is that you can put all your effort into something, and you probably speed it up by 5 or 10%, but at the end, it has its own natural life, its own natural time. And all you can do by trying too hard is getting stressed. And then the other thing is realizing that if you're in for the long haul, you need to have that health. If you're running marathon, you're not sprinting the first kilometer. You kind of have to be, at an even pace. And that just means prioritizing healthy habits, prioritizing meditation, prioritizing going to the gym, prioritizing cooking dinner with the family, prioritizing taking vacation, and doing all those things. They don't necessarily interfere with the business. I think that there's a misconception and kind of a little bit of the mentality of like, oh, yeah, I'm not working too hard. I'm not working hard enough, and I'll get out competed. The reality is, if you're rested and focused, in the proverbial Tim Ferriss 4-hour workday, in 4 hours you can probably sneak in 12 hours of stressed work. And so that's kind of the realization, and it comes down to practice. I mean, I think a lot of people have heard that and said, yeah, right. But once you have the realization, it is really practicing it and making it happen. And then when it becomes a habit, it becomes easy. And then you realize, yeah, it's true. So don't know if I answered the question, but I guess it comes down to you got to do it. You got to do it.
It's about finding that balance and maintain. It sounds like consistency in the mindset is really key, making sure that it's a daily practice. And on that kind of note, you mentioned a couple of things that I think you talked about meditation and cooking dinner with your family. What are some of the other daily healthy habits that you really focus on prioritizing?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, look, I think probably most helpful would be to run it through one of my days.
Yeah.
And because they don't differ, and I have somewhat unusual approach. I don't take weekends to be that different than weekdays. I rest every day, and I work every day. And I enjoy my work. So on weekends, obviously there are social demands, and the schedule is slightly different. But I do the same things that are related to mindfulness every day. So get up early in the morning. I usually get up 4:35. Take a cold shower, have an hour of meditation, and then before I start work, I make a cup of green tea. It kind of slowly starts becoming aware of the day. I usually, if the sun is right, and I have the luxury of living in Los Angeles, where I get to see sunrises, and get exposed to sunlight. And then that takes about an hour and a half to 2 hours of my day. And what people may think this is crazy, but that gets you set in such a mindset to work that when I get to work, and which is usually about 90 minutes to 2 hours, not more, like about 60 to 90 minutes, and I make sure I get up every 30 to 40 minutes, walk around, walk outside. I have a backyard, which is very nice, but do any of those things, but have very concentrated 60 to 90 minutes. And then around 10:30, 11, I'll go and work out. Do either run on the beach, go to the gym, swim, whatever it is. That is a peak time for me to work out. Other people work out at different times, but I do make sure I do physical activity. Then make lunch and get back to another bout of work, which kind of lasts until 5 p.m. And then usually at that time, my son's back home from school, and I love cooking. I mean, that's why I started Edamame. So uh, I have a between 5 and 7, cook, eat dinner with the family, chat and whatnot, and maybe I will check email around 6:37. But normally I try to be done with work by 6 p.m. So in reality, I work probably 5 hours fully, but they're very focused 5 hours. And I have found that to be enough compared to days that I used to work very, very hard. The output of my workday is similar, even though I work only those 4 or 5 hours. So the daily habits, I mean, meditation, working out, um, standing up every hour, eating, lunch and dinner and breakfast, and I do a little bit of intermittent fasting. I leave at least 12 hours, but you can still kind of prepare delicious food, which is, food not just for the body, but for the mind and the soul. So those are some of the habits. And I do a lot of biohacking. So every week I may be trying, or a month, maybe trying different things, but this is kind of the steady habit of my day. And that happens on weekends as well.
Nice. So I think that the way you structure your day is clearly very balanced, and I imagine it wasn't like that previously, as you mentioned. You were working crazy hours before. So how did you incrementally get from
Right.
point A to point B, where you are now very mindful, very cognizant of when you're working and when you're off? How did you really take those steps to get to where you are now?
Yeah. So it does sound, if I were me 10 years ago to where I'm now, be like, no way, I can't do that change. The reality is, like any behavior change, and a lot of the folks here are probably grappling with, how do we do behavior change? A lot of the behavior change starts with one thing at a time. You change one habit at a time, and then work at it 3, 4, 6 months, whatever it is, until it becomes an ingrained habit, and then you change another habit. And it's not like I had a plan. Those are the habits I'm going to change, and I'm going to work the first 6 months on that, and the next 6 months on that. It just kind of naturally happened. I was lucky to start with probably what I think would be the most important thing, which is sleep. And just say, look, I need to sleep 8 hours, and it's going to be my top priority, no matter what. I'm going to be in bed. I'm going to be sleeping for 8 hours, which actually means being in bed 9 hours, 9.5 hours for me. And once that became a habit, and I started, picking up different habits around eating, I, put a lot more greens. I changed my diet, but it was incremental learning and studying, different ways to cook that are a lot more health promoting. One thing at a time. Meditation. I started with the first meditation course was Transcendental Meditation, 20 minutes. If people have done it, they know. I used to do 10 minutes. So now I do an hour to an hour and a half without even thinking about it. But obviously, you start with something small and just be consistent. I've missed only 2 days of meditation in the last 10 years. So, and I know the exact 2 days. So,
That's shocking, and I think that consistency is very admirable. I think there's few things that I've been able to accomplish and do every day for the last 10 years. So that's very incredible. So I think that at least for myself, I would imagine quite a lot of other entrepreneurs who are kind of envious of this. A lot of people want to have these habits. A lot of people want to be not just healthier, but more mindful, more I think efficient and productive with their time, which you clearly have gotten to. But they often don't change, and a lot of these people don't actually take those steps um, to get themselves to the point that you're at now. Why do you think that is?
Well, for the obvious reason, change is hard, and we are creatures of habit, and it's very easy to fall back into the grooves of the habits that and that feel familiar. And shifting to a new habit, it requires effort. It requires actual expenditure of energy, which us being trying to optimize our metabolic expenditure of energy and not trying to do any of those things, any change is very hard to do. And so that's why it is important to do small changes, right? Something that doesn't require that much effort. There is a guy, maybe some of you have read this book called James Clear. He's got something called Atomic Habits, and he's got a very good kind of method of, okay, how do you change your life? What are the small little increments that you can do to change your life? And I think if you have that approach, then it becomes easy. But the basic reason why people don't do it is just changing habits is difficult.
Sort of taking a step back and looking a little bit larger at the industry as a whole. I'm curious what you think, looking ahead, where health and nutrition is going in the future, and may that be personally as well as professionally and within a professional working like working space. What your thoughts are
Yeah,
there?
well, that's a very open-ended question. So, let me give you my dream, and which I've spoken about quite at length before. But I basically believe that people can live to 120 at the very least, without chronic conditions, without mental illness, without stress, happy, fulfilled lives. And I believe that food is an important element of that. It's lifestyle in general, but food is a very important element of that. And so what I hope will happen, and it's not going to be easy, and it's probably going to take longer than I think. But what I hope would happen is we end up in a place where humanity as a whole has a lot more mindful agricultural practices. So we think about regenerative agriculture, that carbon capture, healthy soil with microorganisms that fill our food with micronutrients that have been depleted. We have mindful way to distribute food and prepare it in a way that it doesn't get wasted. 30-40% of food currently gets wasted, thrown out by households that don't cook it, by restaurants that don't sell it, by grocery stores. And there are technologies to do that. So, in the kind of the vein of mindfulness, I think there is mindfulness to be brought to that element. And that obviously will help climate as a whole. And I think that the last element is mindful eating, eat to nourish yourself. I'm not a fan of diets and whatnot. I believe that, people that go to extremes and say, oh, I'm going to be keto for the rest of my life, I'm going to be vegan for the rest of my life. And there might be good reasons why you do that. And I'm not saying that's not the right choice, but I think being mindful of why you do it and stick with it and being open to change is an important thing. And I think mindful eating habits will be ultimately to get them with a food full of nutrients that is delivered at the right time, and it's fresh, and it doesn't get wasted, will get us to a place where we as a humanity will have just longer health spans, and that's kind of my dream. And I don't know if I answered the open-ended question, but that's what I hope, and that's what we're building towards at Adamam, and with everybody else that is in that space.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. I think I know recently there've been quite a few new companies popping up that are focused on eliminating food waste, and so it's definitely sort of, you see things moving in that direction. Hopefully, it'll be at a faster pace and get there on the timeline that you outlined. But hopefully,
Yeah, unless we boil ourselves before that. But that is, I think we're kind of in that race that we got to get to being, changing consciousness of humanity at large scale. So, 'cause otherwise we'll, and I don't like to pontificate, but all the evidence is that the way the temperatures are rising, we might we might end up with with a significant amount of humanity being really badly impacted. So hopefully that will come sooner rather than later.
Fingers crossed. I'm definitely on your side on that one. I think it's a huge important issue, and our healthcare is massively going to be affected by that as well. So it's all kind of intertwined. You can't really have um, one aspect of the world, the climate, fail and then expect everything else to maintain. So
Yep.
definitely see that perspective. So kind of bringing it back to sort of edamame and your personal leadership style. Curious, how do you take the healthy habits that you've established and sort of work that into your leadership style, and then additionally how that sort of reflects in how you care for your employees?
So there are a couple aspects. I don't make anyone do anything they don't want to do. So that's one thing. And work with the employees is working with and I don't even like the classification of employer and employees. I think it's necessary for tax purposes and payroll and so on and so forth. But the reality is, we truly a company, try and solve problems um, and so that is the ethos when we come to the workday. Now, obviously, I want to be mindful of the personal lives of my employees. And so I know them all by name. I know their wives, I know their kids, I know where they go on vacation, I know what they do. And it's almost like treating them like friends. And in reality, they are friends, except, we are friends that are trying to solve a problem, specific problem with technology. And so that is kind of the approach I brought towards everyone in the company, and we come together. We had one of our engineers got really sick with COVID, and we kind of gathered all our resources trying to figure out, how to get transportation to him, how to get him in the hospital, how to get everything done. That was a teamwork, and we just kind of because we care about one another. And I think that's kind of the ethos that was built into the company, and I really enjoy because ultimately, if we don't have um, beautiful human relationships, everything that we do is kind of feels hypocritical. We're trying to help other folks, but we're not being nice to each other. We're not being kind to each other. So um, that is in day-to-day practice. That means, just really asking them personal questions. Are you okay? What's going on with your life? And then once you ask it enough, people start being a lot more open and just say, look, today I'm not feeling well, or I got in a quarrel with my kid and I need to take the day off just to blow off some steam and whatnot. It's completely understandable. So and that's kind of the ethos, and that's the I guess what you might call mindful approach to managing employees. And also, if I had to let go people because I had to, not for financial reasons, not because they didn't do their jobs and whatnot, but you do it in a way that you explain kindly, you give them enough time to find a new place, support them in finding a new job and whatnot. And the two employees that I had to let go at some point because we pivoted the company and I don't need the service anymore and whatnot, we're still very good friends. We go out, we have lunch, we have drinks, all that stuff. So
I love to hear that. I think that finding that balance of treating your team like friends and family, but also making sure that you are communicating openly with them, and having those conversations as early as possible is something that I think everyone can strive to accomplish. So we have a question in the chat. Do you use any specific apps or resources to support your practices?
The direct answer is no,
Mhm.
and it's because over time I have accumulated a lot of different techniques and resources, and I don't feel I need the helper wheels or the crutches to move forward. I think apps are great if you're starting off in a particular direction and you want to practice breath work, or you want to get into hypnosis, or you want to do meditation, and so on and so forth. That's great. I think one thing that I've kept constant is being voracious about learning new things. I don't stick to one particular technique, although some techniques I've done for 2 or 3 years. But I do mix them. I try different things, and then at some point you start knowing yourself very well. You know what works, and it almost like you kind of adjust it day by day. That being said, if you're looking for apps, a couple of apps that I can recommend is Waking Up by Sam Harris. Yes, Waking Up app by Sam Harris. And it's not only that he leads kind of a basic introductory course to meditation, but he invites a lot of folks that have different approaches, like from koan to the headless way to open awareness and so on and so forth. So you get to learn from the best experts in every area meditation technique. So I would recommend that app for meditation. I think tracking your sleep is a very important thing. I do it with an Aura Ring. So that's an app I use actually. I would recommend the Aura Ring, but you can do just basic, when I go to bed, when I wake up, journal or something of that sort. There's apps that track based on your breathing patterns and so on and so forth. So I would recommend one of those. I don't know them personally, but the Aura Ring is great for tracking your sleep. The other thing that I have learned recently and I want to delve into is called an app called Reverie, which is a hypnosis app, which is a new thing that I haven't done. I've done without intent hypnotic states, and I practice lucid dreaming. So delved into that space, but hypnosis is interesting to me. So Reverie is the name of the app. It's free. I would say go try it. And then other things are like yoga nidra, gong, and I'm sure for all of those there's a million apps out there. There's none particular that I use, but I think if you kind of start exploring and learning, you end up finding what works best for you.
Looking at your global perspective, you are in Bulgaria right now, and you've definitely been very well traveled as well. Curious how that perspective has impacted you and impacted your mindfulness as well.
Interesting question. So if you asked that question of me 10 years ago, I probably would have said, well, it's edit a lot, because I've been in so many cultures. I've done deals in so many cultures. There was a previous job that I did, corporate job, where I had to deal and actually sign deals in 40 different cultures, from China to Brazil to Germany to South Africa and whatnot. And that felt like a very important thing that I've added in my kind of instrumentarium, but looking at it now, I just see that as an ego trip. Okay, well, I've done a bunch of things, but have I really added anything that makes me grow as a person and be helpful to other folks? Because ultimately, that's, to me, life comes down to two things: being present at every moment fully, and then being helpful to other folks. And so I've come to realization over the last 10 years through the practices that I've done, that you don't need to go anywhere to be everywhere. Really, your internal world is as big and even bigger sometimes than the external world, than all the universe that we see. And so you can explore without going anywhere. So to some extent, it's kind of great. I've traveled. I have all those experiences, but you come back to the realization, well, it's one Earth, everybody is the same person anyway, and if you treat everyone the same way and hopefully try to help everyone everywhere, things are going to work out. And that's kind of my attitude now. Open to change. I don't know what's going to happen, but that's kind of my attitude now. So.
Open to change. I like that. I think there's a massive I think need or sort of perspective. The new perspective now is that this global perspective is the sort of standard, and a lot of people need to be dealing across borders and traveling internationally. And I think also in the last year or so, a lot of people have sort of put that pressure on as well. And I think the perspective that everyone's human, and as long as you understand that, the need for having that global impact and global reach is a little bit unnecessary, as long as you're conscious of the fact that a human is a human and they deserve to be treated with kindness and empathy and to be helped. I think that that's a
Yeah.
perspective that you don't necessarily hear from a lot of people that are,
Yeah,
well.
I think you also need to bring a very healthy dose of humility, because whether we are mindful of that or not, we are, super privileged group of folks that can travel, and in the eyes of big chunk of humanity, we are the global elite. The oppressors, the one percenters, the people that live the jet lag life and whatnot, and so and that sometimes you start believing those things. So bringing a healthy dose of humility and just saying, look, I'm just trying to be helpful, and approach that, and you know it's a balance, because ultimately social change does occur, and I'm very curious of how that's all going to play out. Globalization versus localization, global elites. I mean, these days, I think people in London, New York, and Hong Kong have more in common than uh, uh,
Gosh, yeah.
people in yeah. There's no difference than England, or China, or the US. So that global perspective is inevitable, but to some extent, it brings its own problems. So I think humility is very important.
So kind of touching on humility, I think that humility is a very important quality when it comes to leadership in general. I think that it's sometimes not necessarily seen that way, but curious, who are some of your leadership examples, both good and bad? Who is someone you look at and say, this is what I've sort of strived to be as CEO of Edamom, and who was someone you looked at and said, this is the exact type of leader that I do not want to be and do not strive to be?
Yeah. Well, strangely enough, there will not be any people in business. So I think if I take um, as example historic figures that have done something, those will be the folks like Gandhi and Martin Luther King and Jesus Christ and Buddha and whatnot, folks that have come and said, look, I want to help a lot of people, and I'm going to do it because I have firm belief, and I'm going to abide by certain principles, whether it's like, satyagraha, nonviolence, or, love, or whatever it is. Those are the people that I actually, whose actions and attitudes and approach to life and interaction with folks, I try to bring to my daily life and into business. So it's not anyone that I can point to, and I'm sure there's millions of examples of folks in the business world. I just probably don't know enough about them, but they're definitely not the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Elon Musks of the world.
I had a feeling those names might come up as a no. They definitely have a very
I mean,
specific.
they're phenomenal people, and I do admire them, for their vision, for their ability to execute, for the change that they're making. But the approach they have is not the approach I value personally in my life. And ultimately, it comes down to, where you find meaning and where you find happiness. So.
That's very, very good. Yeah, they definitely seem to have slightly different priorities when it comes to their businesses and their personal lives and their companies.
I don't know them.
Yeah.
The principle of, right, for all I know, Elon Musk can be, Mother Teresa. I just don't know it.
Who knows? We'll never know. Maybe one day, if any of us meets, we can report back and to let everyone know. So, looking at the sort of healthy habits you've established, are there any healthy habits that you sort of experimented with that maybe you didn't necessarily felt like were a fit for your lifestyle? And then what's the process of experimenting with these new habits, and how would you maybe encourage your fellow entrepreneurs to get started in experimenting with new healthy habits?
Yeah, gosh, there's a lot that didn't make it, and simply because there's only so many things you can do in life, and ultimately, I don't believe in too many things that complicate. So I try to reduce every habit to the bare minimum. And sometimes you do things that you put away in your instrumentarium and come back to them. I used to have a fairly active breath work everyday practice, which I've kind of put on the back burner now, and I do occasionally breath work. Um, so it's not that I've given it up. It's not something that I need right now. Um, I think the way I approach it, and I don't know, that's the way, and everybody is different, but the way I approach it is I'm truly voracious about learning new ways to experiment with the what only I see as a system of mind, body, and spirit. Like, it's one thing, and everything that you do impacts everything else. You can, with your focus on your body, with your breath, or with a physical exercise, you can change your mind. You can change your attitude in your spiritual space, and vice versa. In meditation, you can change your body, you can change the biochemistry, and so on and so forth. So finding what works for you is great, and there's all kinds of things, from the natural, get exposed to sunlight, to more kind of modern infrared saunas and cryotherapy, and supplementation with either natural herbs that have been known for ages, like bacopa or whatnot, or modulated pills that folks have extracted from various plants and whatnot. I do it all just because I'm curious, and I want to experiment of how things how my body reacts, my mind reacts, my spirit reacts. I've gotten to know myself fairly well. I can fairly quickly evaluate if something's going to work for me or not. And then if it does, I try to fit it in the schedule. If it doesn't, obviously, I drop it out. And at some point, if I have too many things in the day, obviously they fill up too much space, then I drop a few things. But I went through my day. The non-negotiables are, meditation, exercise, sunlight, 8 hours of sleep. So.
Definitely. I think over COVID, I think there was a huge change in people's mental health and mindset, because I think quite a few of those very important ones, exercise and sunlight, were cut out. A lot of people didn't get outside. I mean, I can say that from a New York perspective, didn't really leave the house for a couple days on end, which is very, I think, detrimental. And I think that, the fact that you've gotten to the practice of um, being conscious of that is really incredible. I think a lot of people take for granted that they need to be outside, they need to be exercising, and they need to be taking care of themselves. And I think that when you think about it and you take that proactive stance of, checking yourself and making sure to stay on top of your own needs is going to make that big change.
Yeah, but part of mindfulness is being present, and being present is being aware of where you are and how do you feel. And I have fine-tuned that to the extent that if something is bothering me, if it's very slight, I immediately notice it and try to find the cause. And it usually is some kind of a fear or desire, and that in Buddhism, that those are the two things that kind of lead you to get attached to the material world. But and you have a practice to just kind of let it go. But that's mindfulness. That's being present and just kind of knowing yourself. And that's not something that it just comes with practice.
Yeah.
You just have to do it, and do it, and then fail and fail and fail and fail and fail. And I fail at it hundreds of times every day. But the times that I actually notice something and change it, that's great. That it works. And so that keeps you in that centered space of not too excited, not too upset, and kind of being non-attached and really present and happy. I mean, there's no other word for it. It's joy and happiness, of just being.
Do you have any books or articles or resources that you think would be a good place for entrepreneurs to start, who are, hoping to become more mindful, giving themselves, clear guidelines on where to begin? I think it would be great to get a sense of where you started, just so we can give those recommendations to other entrepreneurs.
Right. Well, I can take look. There are a lot of books. If you want to, I mean, it's a rabbit hole. So I generally listen to a book every week. and they usually kind of in that vein. So there's way too many. Depends on where you want to start. My personal journey in the mindfulness space started with transcendental meditation, which then switched to Kundalini yoga, which I got certified into, and then I came across a course by Jeffrey. What's his last name now? Um, that basically gets you to awakening. It's 17 different techniques, handpicked the top hits from around the world of people who have gotten enlightened. And he's got he's got a scientific approach to it, but he claims scientifically, and he's got a way to measure it, that 70% taking that course have gotten enlightened. Now, enlightenment is a very loaded term, but I do believe that you get to a place where things are okay, and every once in a while you get to a place where everything is one. So I forget what his name. The course that he teaches now is called 45 Days to Awakening. I think that I would recommend that. There are places specifically there are people that aggregate information. There are apps that I listen to, like Awareness Explorer. They're purely scientific apps that I'm listening to, including Andrew Huberman and Peter Attia and whatnot. And they're more kind of medical. But those will be ones that their podcasts. Sorry, those will be the ones I would mention. Awareness Explorer sounds true is a place where a lot of the kind of meditation, mindfulness folks end up. Depends on. I mean, there's so many ways you can go. Sam Harris that I mentioned is great. Adya Shanti, somebody that I like. There's so many different ones. So I struggle to recommend a specific course or book because everybody's different. But those are the things. And then if you want to just do lifestyle, I mean, there are basic things around nutrition. Why Do We Sleep, I think, is a great book by forget his first name, but Walker. He's in Berkeley. Excellent book of just understanding the basics of sleep and why you should do it and how to do it. And what are the biohacks, temperature in the room and when you eat food and, when you drink coffee and alcohol and all that stuff. That's a great book. What else? In terms of food, there's a couple. Stephen Gundry is one that has written a book around nutrition, although he's become a little bit too commercial, peddling too many supplements. There is another person whose name now escapes me, but he manages Nutrition Facts, and he's very pro plant-based, but again, very scientific based. So really, it's a rabbit hole. There's no shortage of places to go and find information. I think you just pick one and start there, and whatever interests you. Start with the basic meditation, find one person out, and then just be curious about finding somebody else and ask around. And so, yeah, those are the things. I mean, right now I'm doing a meditation series called Ascension Techniques, which is very esoteric, very kind of, very few people do it. I have a personal teacher, which I meet every 2 weeks, and so on and so forth. But I wouldn't have found that person before having done, 10 or 12 different teachers before that, and haven't gotten to a place where I'm ready. And saying goes, the guru shows up when you're ready for him or her. And so I think just start on the path, put the first foot, and then put the next foot, and then you'll get there.
Thanks for listening to Startup Health Now. Startup Health invests in health transformers from around the world who are committed to achieving audacious health moonshots. If you want to learn how you can join this community of entrepreneurs, or if you want to connect with one of our 350 companies, go to startuphealth.com. If you'd like to learn how you can invest in our Health Moonshot Rolling Fund in collaboration with AngelList, go to healthmoonshots.com. Thanks for listening to Startup Health Now. We'll be back next week.